The first time I satisfying heard the word incompetent applied to me, it came out of a mouth I had helped shape. My son Christopher was standing in the kitchen of the main house, the house I purchased in 1987 with money from my first decade on the bench, and he was speaking to his wife Miranda in that half-whisper people use when they want to be overheard. "She's getting confused again," he said. "Mom mixed up the foundation account numbers at the board meeting." I hadn't mixed up anything. I had deliberately referenced the old account numbers, the ones from before Miranda quietly opened 3 new accounts in November, because I wanted to see if anyone at that table would correct me. No one did, which told me everything I needed to know about who at that table was paying attention and who was complicit. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, or at least to the beginning of the end, which started the way most endings do, with someone underestimating the wrong person. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I am 71 years old. I spent 34 years as a federal bankruptcy judge in Boston, Massachusetts, presiding over cases that involved the most creative financial fraud the human mind can produce. I have read forged signatures the way a musician reads sheet music. I know when a line trembles from deception rather than age. I know the difference between a pen held by someone who is signing their name and a pen held by someone pretending to be someone else. This is not a skill you lose. This is a skill that only sharpens because every year you see a new variation, and every variation teaches you something the forger didn't intend. 3 years ago, my husband Thomas passed away. Thomas was a cardiologist who spent 40 years making house calls in neighborhoods where ambulances took too long. He carried the same leather medical bag for 4 decades, a battered brown thing with brass clasps that he'd had re-stitched twice. When he died, he left behind a charitable foundation worth $4.8 million, endowed with a lifetime of savings, investment returns, and the quiet discipline of a man who drove the same car for 12 years. He left the foundation in my name. He made our son Christopher the trustee, and he trusted that the two of us, together, would continue funding the medical scholarships that were his life's proudest achievement outside of family. Thomas trusted Christopher. I did too. What neither of us accounted for was Miranda. Miranda Hargrove, now Miranda Whitmore, entered our lives 6 years ago with the particular polish of someone who has studied exactly what wealthy families want to see. She was articulate, attentive, and unfailingly warm to Thomas during his illness. She brought homemade soup. She organized his medication schedule. She called me Mom within 3 months of the wedding, a word I accepted because I wanted it to be real. After Thomas died, Miranda volunteered to help with the foundation. She said she had nonprofit experience. She said she wanted to honor Thomas's legacy. She said she couldn't bear to watch me handle all that paperwork alone, not with my tremor. My tremor. Let me tell you about my tremor. I have early-stage Parkinson's disease. My left hand shakes, particularly when I'm tired or cold. It is a medical condition. It is not cognitive decline. It does not affect my ability to read a balance sheet, identify a forged signature, or remember every single wire transfer that has passed through my husband's foundation since the day he died. But Miranda saw that tremor the way a predator sees a limp. She saw opportunity. Within the first year after Thomas's death, Miranda had moved herself and Christopher into the main house on the Beacon Hill estate, claiming it made sense for the foundation's operations. She converted the dining room into an office. She installed herself behind Thomas's desk. She relocated me to the carriage house at the back of the property, a lovely space that I had actually renovated myself. But the symbolism was not lost on me. The matriarch moved to the guest quarters of her own estate. I let it happen. I want you to understand that. I let it happen because I was grieving, and because I wanted to believe that my son's wife was who she presented herself to be, and because 34 years on the bench taught me that the truth reveals itself to those patient enough to watch. 6 weeks after Miranda gained access to the foundation's accounts, I noticed the first irregularity: a wire transfer for $62,000 to a consulting firm I had never heard of. The firm was called Hargrove Strategic Solutions. Miranda's maiden name is Hargrove. She hadn't even bothered to disguise it. The transfer bore my signature, my notarized signature, dated and stamped with Miranda's own notary seal. The date on the notarization was October 14th. On October 14th, I was in Massachusetts General Hospital recovering from a procedure on my left wrist, a surgical intervention for the tremor. I was under anesthesia at the time my signature was allegedly witnessed and notarized. I sat in the carriage house that evening with the document in my lap, and I felt my hands go still. Not the tremor stopping, something deeper, the stillness of recognition. I had seen this before, not in my family, but in my courtroom, hundreds of times. The trusted insider, the vulnerable principal, the forged authorization, the slow drain. I had ruled on these cases for 3 decades. I knew the architecture of this crime the way a carpenter knows the frame of a house. And I knew in that moment of stillness that I had two choices. I could confront Miranda immediately, tip my hand, and watch her destroy evidence, gaslight my son, and use my Parkinson's diagnosis to have me declared incompetent. Or I could do what I had spent my career teaching others to do. Build the case, document everything, make it airtight, make it appeal-proof, make it so complete that when the moment came there would be no room for denial, no angle of escape, no sympathetic narrative about a confused old woman making accusations. I chose the second option, and I spent 19 months executing it. During those 19 months, I watched Miranda escalate with the confidence of someone who believed she was the smartest person in every room. She restructured the foundation's bylaws at a board meeting I was told had been canceled. She installed herself as co-director with independent check-signing authority. When I asked Christopher about the $89,000 in consulting fees paid to a company registered under his wife's maiden name, he looked at me with that particular patience people reserve for aging parents and said, "Mom, you're misreading the nonprofit accounting format." I, who had read nonprofit accounting formats in cases involving hundreds of millions of dollars. I, who could identify a shell company in my sleep. I let it pass. I noted the date. I noted his words. I filed them. Miranda arranged for a neuropsychologist friend to come to a family dinner. What I thought was a Sunday roast turned out to be an informal cognitive assessment. The questions were clumsy, designed to surface memory lapses. "Eleanor, can you tell me what you had for breakfast last Tuesday?" "Eleanor, who is the current vice president?" I answered every question correctly, while watching Miranda's face tighten with each right answer. I even threw in a deliberate pause before answering one, just to see if the neuropsychologist would note it. She did. I saw her write it down. I photographed her notes later that evening when she left them in the powder room. Then I discovered the hedge fund. Miranda had transferred the foundation's entire endowment, Thomas's life's work, $4.8 million, into a high-risk investment vehicle managed by her brother, Ryan Hargrove. The paperwork bore my notarized signature on 6 separate occasions, all dated during periods when I was either hospitalized or away from Boston for medical consultations. Miranda's notary stamp was on every single document. If you're listening to this and someone in your life has begun questioning your mental clarity while simultaneously managing your finances, I need you to hear me clearly. They are not worried about your health. They are worried you will notice what they are doing. A tremor in your hand does not mean confusion in your head. Build your case like you would build an appeal, because someday you may need to present it. The guardianship papers came next. Christopher arrived at the carriage house one evening, his hands shaking worse than mine, holding a manila folder. "Mom, Miranda thinks it would simplify things if you signed this. Just a formality. Power of attorney, guardianship, it just makes the foundation stuff easier." I looked at the papers. They had been drafted by Miranda's cousin, a family law attorney named Daniel Hargrove. The entire family, it seemed, was in on the architecture. I told Christopher I would think about it. He looked relieved. He held my hand at church that Sunday, and I sat in the pew knowing that the guardianship papers were sitting in the glove compartment of his car, waiting. Then 2 things happened that moved my timeline forward. First, Miranda changed the locks on my carriage house while I was at a medical appointment. She told the property manager it was a safety concern, that a confused elderly woman with access to foundation assets needed to be secured. I came home to new locks on my own door, my own property, the property I have owned since 1987. Second, and this is the one that still makes my hand steady with cold clarity, I found the email. What I found on that server in January explained the night they changed my locks. Christopher, for all his faults, had set up a shared family server for household documents. Miranda apparently forgot this when she drafted an email to her estate attorney. The auto-save function preserved it in the shared drive. The email read, "And I will remember every word until the day I die. Christopher is completely managed. The tremor makes her look incompetent even when she's sharp. We drain the foundation to the shell company by February. Eleanor will be in the ground or in a ward before anyone audits. Either way, we inherit the estate and the board thanks us for our service. In the ground or in a ward, that is what my son's wife wrote about me. The woman who called me mom. The woman who brought soup to my dying husband. In the ground or in a ward. Either way works. I printed that email, I laminated it, and I called Margaret Chen, my former chief clerk, who is now Deputy State Attorney General of Massachusetts. Margaret came to the carriage house. I made her coffee in the old percolator Thomas had given me for our 20th anniversary. I set the documents in front of her, all 19 months of them, organized chronologically, cross-referenced, and indexed. Margaret read for 45 minutes without speaking. When she looked up, her face was pale. "Eleanor," she said, and her voice had that particular flatness that prosecutors use when they are suppressing emotion. "Your daughter-in-law committed notary fraud, wire fraud, and what you're describing with the neuropsychologist constitutes attempted unlawful guardianship procurement. This isn't a family matter anymore. This is my jurisdiction." I asked her if she was certain she wanted to pursue it. She asked me if I was certain I wanted to destroy my son's marriage. I told her the marriage was already destroyed. Miranda had seen to that. All I was doing was making the destruction visible. Margaret asked me how I wanted to handle the timing, and I told her about the gala. Every year, the Whitmore Foundation holds an annual gala honoring Thomas's legacy. Donors, board members, community leaders, scholarship recipients, 300 people in a hotel ballroom raising glasses to a man who spent his life healing. This year, the board had voted, at Miranda's suggestion, to present the Philanthropist of the Year award to Miranda herself, in my name. She would stand on that stage, accept that award, and speak about Thomas's vision while 3 shell companies bearing her maiden name systematically drained the funds that made those scholarships possible. I told Margaret we would do it at the gala. The planning was precise. I had the forensic handwriting analyst's report confirming that 23 wire transfers totaling $1.4 million bore my forged signature, all processed through Miranda's notary stamp. I had the email. I had 19 months of transaction records, audit trails, and account histories. I had everything loaded onto a presentation file and provided to the hotel's audiovisual team under my name. I was, after all, still the foundation's director. My name was still on the event contract. The technology staff answered to me. If you are still listening, stay with me. Because what happened next is the reason I am telling you this story. The ballroom was beautiful. Thomas would have hated the expense of it, but loved the people in it. First-generation medical students he had helped fund, doctors from his old clinic, community organizers, 300 people who believed in what that foundation represented. I arrived early, wearing the navy suit I had worn for my last day on the bench. I carried Thomas's medical bag, the same battered leather bag Miranda had moved to storage, claiming it was too painful a reminder. I had retrieved it that morning. Miranda took the stage at 8:15. She was radiant. She spoke about Thomas's vision with the fluency of someone who had studied the script. She said the words legacy and commitment and family with the practiced sincerity of a woman who had spent 3 years embezzling from a dead man's charity. When they handed her the Crystal Award, she held it up and said, "I accept this on behalf of Eleanor Whitmore, who Thomas would be so proud to see resting comfortably at home tonight." Resting comfortably, as if I were already in the ward she had planned for me. I stood up from my seat in the 3rd row. I walked to the stage. I climbed the stairs with my hand on the railing, and yes, my left hand trembled, but my voice did not. Miranda's smile froze when she saw me. I took the microphone from the stand. "Before we celebrate philanthropy," I said, "let's examine exactly where my husband's charity money went." I nodded to Margaret, standing at the back of the ballroom. The lights dimmed, the projector activated, and 19 months of transaction records appeared on the screens behind Miranda's head. 23 forged wire transfers, 6 notarized documents dated during my hospitalizations, 3 shell companies registered to Hargrove, $1.4 million diverted from medical scholarships to a hedge fund run by Miranda's brother. Miranda's notary stamp, over and over and over, on signatures that were not mine. The room went silent. Not the silence of confusion, the silence of comprehension. 300 people reading the evidence at the same time, arriving at the same conclusion, turning to look at the woman holding the Crystal Award. Miranda's voice when it came was everything I expected. Loud, rapid, desperate. This is Eleanor is confused. She has Parkinson's. She doesn't understand the accounting, Christopher. Tell them, Christopher. Christopher was sitting at the front table. He was staring at the screen. Specifically, he was staring at the final slide, the one Margaret had insisted we include. Miranda's draft email, every word projected 10 feet tall. Christopher is completely managed. He read it twice. I watched his lips move. Two federal agents entered the ballroom at 8:32. Margaret had coordinated the timing. They approached Miranda at the stage. They identified themselves. They informed her she was being detained on suspicion of wire fraud. Miranda's hands were shaking worse than mine have ever shaken. Her notary license was revoked before midnight. Her law school application, which I had never thought to investigate but Margaret's team had, contained false credentials, triggering a separate investigation. Her brother Ryan's hedge fund faced an SEC emergency review by morning. Her cousin Daniel Hargrove was reported to the Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers for conspiracy. The bureaucratic machinery, once activated, does not stop. It grinds with the patience of institutions, which is the only patience greater than mine. Christopher came to the carriage house the next morning. He sat at my kitchen table and cried, not the tears of a man who had been betrayed by his wife. The tears of a man who had been shown in undeniable detail that he had been used as an instrument against his own mother. He said he was sorry. He said he didn't know. I believed him about the not knowing. I was less certain about the not suspecting. He filed for annulment the following week. When prosecutors showed him the full email, the part about him being completely managed, something in him broke and rebuilt in a different shape. I do not know yet what that shape will become, but I know it will be his own, not Miranda's. Now let me tell you about the quiet that followed. The first legitimate board meeting of the Whitmore Foundation in 3 years took place on a Tuesday morning in March. I sat at the head of the table, in the seat Miranda had occupied for 20 months. My granddaughter Sophie sat beside me. Sophie is in her second year of law school. She took notes the way I taught her, in the margins with questions marked by stars. Thomas's portrait hung behind us, that photograph from the clinic's 20th anniversary, where he is holding the medical bag and laughing at something the photographer said. The new scholarship recipients were announced that morning. 8 first-generation medical students who would receive funding for their entire education. They will never know how close the foundation came to having nothing left to give. They will never know that a woman with a notary stamp and a hedge fund brother nearly erased their future. They will sit in lecture halls and cadaver labs and eventually in examination rooms, and they will heal people because Thomas's money went where Thomas intended. I opened Thomas's medical bag at that board meeting, not the way I had opened it at the gala to reveal documents and evidence. I opened it the way Thomas used to, with both hands on the clasps, pressing the brass buttons with my thumbs. Inside, I had placed the Foundation's new charter, signed by every remaining board member, with governance provisions that would prevent any single individual from ever again gaining unilateral control. I placed the charter on the table. Sophie witnessed my signature. My hand trembled. My signature was unmistakably mine. The carriage house is quiet now. I wake up early. I make coffee in the percolator. I read case law for pleasure, the way some people read novels. I walk the garden path between the carriage house and the main house, which stands empty now. Christopher having moved to a smaller place in Cambridge while he figures out who he is without someone managing him. My hands shake. They have always shaken, at least for the last few years. But they still know how to hold a pen. They still know how to turn the pages of a legal brief. They still know how to clasp the brass fittings of a 40-year-old medical bag. The tremor is not weakness. The tremor is simply the body's way of reminding you that you are still here, still moving, still alive. Miranda wanted to make that tremor mean something it didn't. She wanted it to mean I was finished. She was wrong. I want to share something with you, because this story is not only mine. Research shows that elder financial abuse is one of the most underreported crimes in America. According to the National Council on Aging, approximately 1 in 10 Americans aged 60 or older has experienced some form of elder abuse, and financial exploitation accounts for the largest share of substantiated cases. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has found that in cases of elder financial exploitation, family members and trusted individuals are the perpetrators more than 60% of the time. Not strangers, not scam callers, the people at your dinner table, the people who call you mom. If you recognize this pattern, if someone in your life is questioning your mind while managing your money, if the signature on documents doesn't feel like yours, if the meetings keep getting rescheduled and the bylaws keep changing and your access keeps shrinking, you are not confused. You are being managed, and the solution is not confrontation. The solution is documentation, patience, evidence, and one phone call to someone who will believe you. I am Eleanor Whitmore. I am 71 years old. My hands shake and my mind does not. I spent 34 years reading forgeries for a living, and my daughter-in-law thought I wouldn't recognize my own name written by someone else's hand. Thomas's foundation is secure. His scholarships continue. His bag sits on the shelf in my study, clasps polished, leather oiled, ready for the next time it needs to be opened. Sophie is coming for dinner on Sunday. She wants to talk about estate law. I told her to bring her notes. So tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And if someone in your family told their lawyer you would be in the ground before anyone checked the numbers, what would you do? Would you confront them at the kitchen table? Or would you wait and build and choose your moment? Drop your answer in the comments, and if this story reminded you of someone who needs to hear it, someone whose hands shake but whose mind is sharp, send it to them. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is let them know they are not alone and they are not confused, and the tremor does not define them. Subscribe if you want to hear what happens when quiet people finally speak. I will be here. I'm not going anywhere. Miranda can tell you that much.